All right, welcome back. I'm Coach Doug's, and with me again we have sports attorney Dan Lust. Dan, there's so much going on right now. Usually we have like the Snyder Saga part, 17. Soon it'll be part 17, but there's just so much going on right now with NIL deals, with people getting arrested. It's just let's start with the NIL deals. I'm an FSU guy. I'm a Florida State grad. That's where I did my pre-law educate. I have got my pre-law education there at Florida State. So anytime I have an opportunity to kind of look down on Florida and Miami, I try and take advantage of it. And so we have some NIL deal stuff going on with both of those universities. Help us out. Fill us in what's going on.
I always get confused. So you went to Florida State, but Coach Doug's won the Natty at Tennessee. So you're kind of both.
Yeah. So that was I came in to the fold when Coach Doug's was at Florida State because I had all the gear and everything ready to go. If Coach Doug's never goes to Florida State, Coach Doug's is not here.
Well,
so that had to happen.
Fortunately, you did not go to Tennessee, and we won't talk about how Tennessee just got in trouble. That's a story for another day.
We'll sweep that under the rug.
So let's start here. So just a little bit of a history, right? The NIL era has been in existence since July 1st of 2021. A couple updates on the NIL front after, I don't think any real dates of significance in the last 19 months. And then we have two that happened in the last week or so. So it's a good time to have this conversation. So I don't know, the NCAA silent, basically just the wild, wild west. There is no sheriff in town. Mark Emmert kind of checks out. He goes, I'm resigning. This new guy is going to take over. And then for this 19-month period, there is nothing. So some schools kind of, played it safe, and other schools were kind of pushing the envelope a little bit. And we just, in our legal space, we thought it was a matter of time before the NCAA, they're not going to cease to exist. They're going to at least try to make some.
They're going to try and hold on.
Yeah, they're going to do something. They're going to try to throw around their weight. So we had a date. I mean, people kind of found out about it recently, but the NCAA switched their kind of, enforcement mechanism for this NIL era to almost be a guilty until proven innocent standard. And they started making some hires for enforcement roles. So we're like, something's going to happen. And then you kind of look around the landscape and who has been the loudest, right? Who has been the loudest in the space? There have probably been two programs, for better or for worse. I mean, I have no prejudice against Miami or Florida, but those have been two of the louder programs between John Ruiz over at Miami, one of the big boosters over there. And then this kind of, we'll say interesting Jaden Rashada saga that involves Florida and Miami. And, in the space, those that have followed him closely thought that either Miami or Florida would get popped first. So 19 months into the era, the NCAA turns around. They have their first, we'll call it like a quasi NIL infraction, but Miami gets popped. We can certainly talk about it a little bit. Some might say it's a slap on the wrist. I think it's kind of a warning shot for maybe other things to come. And then Doug's, if you ask me, I think Florida, I'd put them at minus 250 to be one of the next three schools that get something. That's just my.
Yeah. Well, and so with Miami, and it's came across Jack Mack in the office. He's talked about it a lot, but the NCAA can come down and if they can try and enforce whatever they're going to try and enforce against anyone, but they're not going after any major football recruit or anything like that. They're going after these twins who joined the Miami basketball program for having a dinner. And it's just like you mentioned earlier, it is the wild, wild west. Nobody really knew what was going on. And there were some state legislatures were trying to figure out how could we compete? But yeah, that's the NCAA. It seems like they were going to do something major. They were going to actually fire a shot. And then John Ruiz said, bring it. And then they kind of stepped back and were like, all right, well, hey, we're going to punish you a little bit, but don't do it again. It's like, try me.
Well, I guess let's put into context. I find this to be the best part, right? People might be sitting on the sidelines like, wait, okay, they picked Miami. We could have maybe predicted that. But they picked women's basketball. Maybe that is kind of head scratching. And then you have to kind of think why would they have possibly done that? So I don't really think any of this is a coincidence. Charlie Baker is this former Massachusetts governor who's taking over for Mark Emmert. He's the new, grand poobah of the NCAA. So he took over. We're recording this today on March 1st. That's when Charlie Baker took over, and they waited 19 months for what? Okay, last week, that's the week that they happened to issue their first punishment. Who do they punish? John Ruiz, probably the most recognizable booster in the country, and the Cavender twins, who have like 5 million plus TikTok followers of their own sensation, right? So maybe I don't know, Miami is one of a handful of schools making a lot of noise. Then you have the most notable booster and maybe the most notable female athletes. They have a handful in the country. So I think the NCAA wanted to pick a scenario that was maybe the one that was going to get on a lot of radars, right? The Cavenders were in like billboards in New York City when the NIL era passed. So what do? And this is the point that you just raised. They issue the coach, I think, a 3-game suspension, and there's going to be little minor punishments, but the booster, John Ruiz, does not get punished. The Cavenders don't get punished. And interestingly, they say in this article that, well, a disassociation penalty, one that would require kind of John Ruiz to have a separation from the University of Miami, that it might have been on the table, but they reluctantly decided not to do it. So Ruiz comes out and he's like, well, if they would have done it, I would have sued them. And maybe he has a lawsuit, maybe he doesn't. But to me, at least from my vantage point, the NCAA is basically, I think, it's almost like a plea deal, right? They didn't have to take anyone to court. Miami took a slap on the wrist. Ruiz kind of looks bad. The Cavenders kind of look bad. Miami looks bad. And guess who looks like they have some kind of authority, right? The NCAA. So I'm never one to say that the NCAA has done a good job. But I think they thread the needle in here in a way that, like, no one's going to be too angry at them. And they're not getting sued out of this.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. People are willing to put up with, all right, give us your little suspension here or there. But at the same time, in the back of everyone's head, they know the NCAA wants to come down hard. But who knows where they're going to be in 5 or 10 years. But you're absolutely right. I talked to Frank about this. Frank worked in a courtroom. He was a law clerk for a while. I think law clerk is the clerk of the court or whatever during trials. And we talked about that, how they say, oh, hey, we're gonna hit you with this, we're gonna hit you with that, and it's all talk, just so that when they come down with what they really can only do, then they're lenient. Then they're, hey, we could have done much worse.
Right.
And to some people, they go, oh, thank you so much, NCAA. To the people that have been jaded and see what is the NCAA is for, that doesn't fly, and it just kind of infuriates me even more. And it's just like, just come on, like go at it, try it again. We talk about drama all the time and how we want these court things, we want these court filings to play out. I want to see that play out. Do it. I want the drama.
I'm all for it. I don't know if we're going to talk about it today, but it's almost like these headlines that are coming out with Dan Snyder. It's like, this is jail type fraud, like that he could go to jail. So, Doug, are we sure that was Frank the law clerk or was he the bailiff? Because I think he would like I'd be the bailiff.
He would be a great bailiff.
Jokes aside, he would be a fantastic bailiff. He might actually be a good judge, but story for another time.
Yeah, as long as the Mets aren't playing, I don't think you would want to go into his courtroom after a Mets loss. Especially, he would definitely have his phone set up against the gavel, watching the Mets play while he's listening to a plea deal.
I can totally see that. I mean, I think that's the thing with the NCAA. I think people, and there have been people that have kind of been giving in this advice in the space, kind of saying, hey, the NCAA is not going to do anything. Do what you want. It's not going to be a big deal. We'll just sue them. And then, I'm never really one to give the NCAA compliments, but if they found a way to thread the needle, and just remember for Miami, I think does look bad as a result of all of this. They had this big, they recruited the Cavender twins to go play basketball at the school. I don't know how many people are paying attention, but like Miami's women's basketball team is not winning any national championships, and they don't look great out of the Saga. They don't look great that their coach was unaware of impermissible conduct rules. I only say, and this is Doug's to your point that you just raised, I call this the first NIL infraction. It wasn't really, it was kind of like impermissible booster conduct, but the NCAA wanted to call it, at least from my vantage point, an NIL violation, because it looks like the sheriff's back. Charlie Baker's in town. And today there's comments that come out from Charlie Baker like, we got to watch out for this era. We got to watch out. There's some predatory agents. There's some predatory landscape. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, wait, it's like, that hot dog meme. Like we got to find the guy who's doing this.
Who did this? Yeah.
You guys were gone for 19 months. Like you created this like wormhole that people entered into and thought a gray area was going to be okay. So if kind of looking back on it, again, the NCAA knows what they're doing. They had 19 months to come up with this plan. It looks like Baker's going to come in and say, you know what, we can kind of try to control this era because we're trying to protect the student athletes from some of these, these agents and stuff that's going on in different schools. But I think it's a good attempt. I think it's a creative attempt.
It's funny for the NCAA to step in and say, hey, we have to protect the rights of these students and make sure they're getting paid respectfully,
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's a bold move. It's like one of those bold strategy cards. We'll see if it works out, but like, I don't know. Well, I guess, do you want to talk about Florida here? This one.
Yeah, no, I was going to say at a certain point, I don't know if the NCAA is necessary here, because it seems what Florida did is just that, like, the NCAA is necessary we have a court system in place that can handle this.
You might be right. I mean, like this is why I think the Miami one was they picked their spots. I mean, I heard there's a report, I think it's from SI, that 12 schools were under investigation and have been under investigation for some time. So the NCAA wanted to pick one to be the one violation they pop before Charlie Baker comes into office and says he's going to clean up the NIL era. So I'm like, timing is not a coincidence by any means. So, okay, it's women's basketball. It's the Cavender twins. It's an impermissible meal. It's not going to change the world, right? The Jaden Rashada one, again, this is why you might be hearing me think that the NCAA's argument might be something, at least in the public realm. Jaden Rashada is a guy, one point in time, these high school kind of outlets had him ranked as the number 7 quarterback in the country. So they're, I'll call it a bidding war. I'm sure Florida and Miami wouldn't call it this, but there seems to be kind of a battle, a jostling to get Jaden Rashada to commit to one of the schools. So reports, not mine, that I think there was a committed deal at one point for him to go to Miami, that Miami, one of the collectives or, not the school itself, but outside entities have come up with around $8 million for Rashada to commit to the school. Ton of money, right?
That's
so then a couple, weeks go by, and then there's another story that comes out that Florida has now come up with in the vicinity. Again, not Florida, the school, but Florida, the collectives and these outside entities have come up with like $13.8 million. So as the story goes, Rashada goes from Miami. He looks over at Florida and he goes, okay, it's a lot more money. So Doug's where the NCAA, this is why that's not some type of bold prediction that they're looking at Florida right now. That, according to multiple reports, again, not mine, that money never materialized. And that deal kind of fell through. So then Rashada is like, wait, like, why am I going to Florida? They don't have the money. Like, is that Miami deal still there? Like, doesn't look like it. And then Rashada ends up over at Arizona State. And at least as far as I know, I don't think he signed for a nickel. So, Doug's, at least where I'm sitting on the sidelines, it looks like a teenage kid has now lost out on $13.8 million because of the collective, the agents. I have no idea how it happened, but all of a sudden, right to your point, he's got 13 million reasons to want to sue and figure this thing out and conduct some really messy discovery into, right? Discovery, which we've talked about on prior shows for those that are keeping track, text messages, emails, phone logs, conversations that happened between, potentially Miami and, the collectives, and Florida and the collectives, and maybe the lawyers and the agents, all of which nobody wants to come out. So I think it's a really messy situation brewing. And if the NCAA is going to put their foot down and say, you guys need us, you need us to play sheriff, I think this Rashada situation is just like a textbook case right here.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about it before. Everyone, well, I guess it was about 2 years ago now, there was a meme page on Twitter that put out, they changed their photo to Adam Schefter. I think they called themselves Adam Shafter as the user handle. And they tweeted out that Barstool Sports is paying $1.5 million for this kid who was an FSU recruit. Deion snagged him. Deion stole him, rightfully so.
Travis Hunter, right? Travis Hunter? Yeah.
And if you know Deion, if you've talked to Deion, it's not crazy for Deion to come into your house and convince you and your family, like, hey, listen, I have your best interest at heart. Follow me. That's not crazy. Florida State just happened to be the school he was committed to at the time. But anyway, the false rumor, got out that Barstool had paid this kid $1.5 million to go play it with Deion. And at the time, there was a huge FSU Spaces on Twitter. Twitter Spaces became a thing again because of that day. And people are talking about fire Mike Norvell, like, how could he let this happen? And I'm just sitting back going, like, I've just talked to David Dan, they've said like, no, we have nothing to do with that. And also $1.5 million to a high school kid to go play college football, like that seemed like a ridiculous amount of money to me at the time. And then I hear what Miami's offering, and then I hear that Florida offered at least 13 million. Some people in the office have told me that there was a booster who guaranteed half. He said he told either the collective or the university that, hey, listen, I can come up with 7 or 8 million. If you guys will pay the other half, then we'll get it going. And the other half came up with $200,000. And that's when it all fell apart. I can't remember who the recruiting Twitter handle was that broke it and said, hey, listen, this kid's he's not enrolled at Florida. He has requested a release of his letter of intent. And then his father came out and said, no, that's not true. And there was a whole big ordeal about it. I mean, what happens to the University of Florida here? Are they responsible for at least the money he could have gotten from Miami? Even if they say, well, hey, we don't have 13 million. Like, all right, well, I was at least getting 9 million from Miami. Well, but here's like he was offered it, but we don't know if he's actually going to get it. And also, is that for all 4 years? What happens if there's there's so much, I guess that all has to be negotiated between them, which is like, to your point, we would get in discovery.
Well, here's the tricky part, right? And this is the part I'm kind of alluding to, right? As of now, and we'll see if the NCAA changes their regs at some point in time. Like the NCAA just sent a warning letter over to Texas A&M, and they said that like Texas A&M is I think using at least allegedly, reportedly, whatever you want to say, their 12th man, which is a fundraising wing of Texas A&M, to kind of almost pseudo act like a collective and raise money through the school, but on an entity that the school kind of controls. So we still have rules in place that the schools cannot be the ones that front that money. We're maybe getting into an era where the NCAA will kind of say that's fine and not have these outside entities controlling the collectives. But right now, the NCAA doesn't seem to want that, doesn't want to see schools to be controlling the money, which, yes, I think that's probably an easier era. Instead, what we have is this era of collectives, which are supposed to be legally distinct from the school. So you asked me, like, is Florida going to be on the hook for the 13.8? Right? Could Miami be on the hook for the 9 million? I wouldn't think so, unless there's some type of paper trail that is found in discovery whereby the schools were behind the scenes in any way, shape, or form, backing that money or making promises relating to that money. Separate. Like I've always had this thought, and you and I haven't spoke about it. Like when Arch Manning commits to the University of Texas, like we're never going to know, you and I, like how much money Arch Manning got to go to Texas. I imagine he got the bag, right?
A lot, yeah.
But like at the time he commits to Texas, Quinn Ewers is there. They're a program that's kind of in flux. Like he probably had to have been told on the one hand, like, hey, you're going to start by X year, whatever year, right? And on the other side, he's being told how much money he's going to get. So just from the outside, like those conversations are happening at the same time. Are the collectives not talking to the school? So yeah, I would find it very interesting what discovery would bear out, who the collectives were talking to, where that money was coming from. When they only came up with $200,000 was a call placed, right, to Florida, to a coach, to someone in the football program. Those connecting of the dots are why I would be very nervous if I was Florida, right? Or if we talk about the Cavendish saga of John Ruiz, right, who's threatening to sue the NCAA. If he does sue the NCAA is entitled to discovery, and they're going to look at John Ruiz's text messages. So yes, we might say that Ruiz might be really fun to sue the NCAA. Maybe Miami fans are rooting for it. Like you and I, the nerds over here, we're rooting for it to see some discovery. But like, there's a lot of skeletons, and not that I know that they exist, but like, a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes. Those $100 handshakes that people have been talking about for a while, we don't really see those in court filings, especially not in the NIL era. It hasn't happened. Yeah. So yeah, I'm certainly intrigued to see what comes out there.
Yeah, you bring up a good point as far as if a collective is promising or at least offering payment for play, at some point, you're talking about that's a coach's decision. A coach is the one saying, hey, not to throw anything at Manning, but obviously, what if something happens and he can't play?
Right.
It's or the coach benches him for a certain reason, or there's a quarterback.
Here's the best question. Let's say the collective, like let's actually use Jaden Rashada, which I find to be pretty interesting. Right now, you are not allowed to base compensation on performance. So if a kid throws 3 picks, you can't cut him from that contract. you could try to pretend it's something else, but if it's a pretense that you want to cut him because he's not playing well. So Rashada, as the story goes, had a showcase where he didn't perform that well. And he lost that $13 million contract after that bad showcase. So let's say, Doug's, you and I ran the Florida Gators collective, right? And we really want Jaden Rashada. We're like, we got to get him for the school. But let's say the University of Florida doesn't want Jaden Rashada, right? They don't want him. Like, they have other quarterbacks, they have guys, they have upperclassmen, they want to keep the job. Like, you would think that, the left hand would have to be looking at what the right hand's doing. Like, why would the collective commit $13 million unless they had some assurances from the school, like, we want the kid? So that's why those levels of communication, as in between Florida, the collectives, this one, that one, all of that would become discoverable in a lawsuit. So we're watching it very closely. But again, 13 million reasons to sue. I would be surprised if he's not at least exploring it.
Absolutely. And there's no way. And I say this, even though we talk about Dan Snyder and how he's a billionaire and still does the stupidest things, but there's no way that people are throwing around $13 million if they don't have some kind of confidence that what they're saying is going to come.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I find the whole story to be fascinating. There's no precedent for it. But let's just say, we had those college hoops corruption cases where different payments, different athletes came out. Mm-hmm. This might be this version of it, the NIL version, but we'll see. We'll see what that belly looks like underneath it all.
And I have heard someone mentioned, and I don't know if this is a rumor or if the NCAA is looking into it, but the idea of a university should be able to, and this may be their way of saying, hey, we approve of, or we're kind of in lockstep, even though we're not together, a university approving a collective, sanctioning a collective, saying, hey, listen, we're not, connected to them at all. However, this is the one that we, if you're going to donate money, this is who it should be to. That would kind of tell everyone, hey, listen, we're kind of on the same page, even though we're not together. And also it would get rid of any collectives that are on the outside that might be, pulling away kids for nefarious reasons.
The NCAA passed regs that do allow a school to announce an official, endorsement, make an official one.
An endorsement, yeah.
Not everyone has done it. And not every school, it's really the Power Five. I think every Power Five school has one. But, as you get lower, right, like, some of these group of five schools don't have collectives, some basketball schools, D1 level, don't have collectives. So, I think there's a lot of work to be done. But to I guess the larger conversation of what's going to happen next on the enforcement front, I think the Miami situation was a shot at a booster. So look out for the other very loud boosters around the country. That might be where the NCAA is going. And I think if and when the Rashada situation happens, which I imagine, again, is going to be one of the next few, if they do, whenever they come ahead with violations or announcing of investigations, announcing of findings, might not be a violation. They're going to really take a very hard look at the collective. So we have yet to see the NCAA really, take a shot on that front. So we'll see. But yeah, a very ugly situation. And a kid, a young kid is out $13.8 million and hasn't recovered it. So
yeah. Well, I listen, if there is an event or something, obviously I don't want anything. I'm upset that, it's upsetting to hear that happen to a good kid who just wanted to go and play football. But at the same time, listen, if the University of Florida collective or whatever you want to call it is out $13 million and they don't have the kid playing for their football team, God bless.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I'm not going to be too upset about their.
You won't be. You won't.
No, not at all. Well, so that's going on in college. Meanwhile, and like I said, we have a lot of stuff to go over, but then we also have Dan Snyder, the NFL. It's just more and more stuff keeps coming out, and we've talked about this. The more stuff that comes out against him, and he's still like holding his ground. I don't want to use the word respect. But at a certain point, it's almost like, hey, like I can't fault him for being such a crazy person if he's willing to stand his ground till the end.
That's fair. I mean, like I'm gonna assume a lot of people that are watching this are somewhat in the weeds. Like you and I were kind of nerding out for a minute, but like what Dan Snyder is doing is really unprecedented. Like his back's up against the wall. We've talked about this on prior shows, but it's like lack of institutional controls. He has his own sexual harassment claims, sexual assault claims. There's like inappropriate video cheerleader shoots that allegedly end up on his desk. There's cooking the books. There's cover-ups. There's like 8 things, right? So you and I,
email.
Right. It's like, I don't know how many more things there are to be accused of. So, you and I have now, I think, done at least 3 times where we've talked about Snyder, and I'm like, can't get any worse. It's not possible. Got to boot the guy at a certain point. So we're sitting here, Doug. The NFL has been looking into Snyder really since July of 2020, right around there. So it's been, almost 2.5, getting close to 3 years. The NFL has yet to release a full report on like all of this stuff. So you have to ask yourself, like, okay, like why is it taking so long? Like, I don't understand it. So then to your point, it's like they have this mountain, you think, of evidence against him. Like, okay, the guy is kind of with his back against the wall. The NFL is trying to do him some favors and run the clock out so he can maybe sell to Bezos or this one or that one. And then you have Snyder, on the other hand, who you'd think is like cowering in a corner, scared that they're going to take away his toy. And he's like, okay, NFL, I am not selling. It's like the Leo scene. He's like, we're not leaving. We're not leaving until you indemnify me for any lawsuits I got to be faced with. So Snyder is pointing at Goodell in the face and basically saying, I am not selling this team until you indemnify me for anything and everything that could come out of a potential lawsuit from a sale. So, I mean, I don't know how or where he gets the confidence from, but you and I are not billionaires, so maybe that's just not in our DNA.
Yeah, and it comes up. We've talked about it before because there were rumors. I don't know if it was an ESPN article, but there were rumors that Dan Snyder had said, I have dirt on so many of those guys, referring to the owners. He has dirt on so many of the people in the NFL that he's basically saying, hey, call my bluff. I'll take that. And I think, and this might be his play, the crazier it gets, the more unreasonable he seems, the more likely it seems that he would bring the whole ship down with him if he could, or if he needed to.
Should we talk about the new allegation here? I feel like it fits perfectly.
Yeah, of course. Let's do it.
Okay. So should we put on our conspiracy hats, or should we just like talk like normal?
With Dan Snyder, there's no hats. There's no hats at all.
So we're gonna go in the weeds for a second. The big story yesterday, and we've talked about it. Some people I think are like, oh, how many Snyder stories could there be? So I will tell you before we get into it, this is of a different character and tone than what we've heard before. This is not really a story about Snyder personal expenditures and cooking the books like we've heard that. The story that came out yesterday from ESPN is kind of a story of this kind of cover-up of all cover-ups, as in between the NFL, NFL arbitrator, and Bank of America. So it's the question that you and I have had, like, what is taking so long? Like, how is this happening? How does Snyder think he has any leverage? Like, does he have dirt on these people? And then what comes out as a story, essentially, I'll at least tell you what it is, and I'll tell you where my conspiracy head goes. But essentially that like a $55 million secret loan was allegedly taken out by Dan Snyder that required minority shareholder approval. So I don't want to nerd out on everybody too much, but there were 40% of the team was owned by these 3 guys. One was was in control of FedEx, some big players, some billionaires. And, they said they saw it in a footnote at some point in one of these corporate disclosures, and they go, hey, Dano, that $55 million loan, like we kind of had to approve of that. That's in our shareholder agreement. And Snyder kind of blows them off, doesn't say anything. And then they end up starting an arbitration where they, kind of pseudo sue Snyder, like, tell us what happened to that $55 million loan. What did you spend it on? Because we're looking at the books and it looks like you're spending $4.5 million on like a decal for your private plane to be the Washington logo. Looks like you're spending money on yachts and this and this. This seems like a lot of corporate fraud. NFL, can you look into this? Arbitrator, can you look into this? Bank of America somehow approved of this loan and we never approved of it. What is happening? So those are the allegations that ESPN kind of puts forward and says that, hey, this story, this little nugget of this, where did the money go? That's the subject of these, prosecutors in Virginia that are looking into it, trying to figure out if bank fraud possibly occurred between Bank of America and the NFL and Snyder. So, yeah, this is a very you joked online. It's like, oh, Snyder's going to end up in prison. I think you did one of your your artwork for one of our previous podcasts was like Snyder in like a jumpsuit.
Behind the jail cell.
But an allegation like this of bank fraud, assuming we get to that point, and we haven't heard any comment from the prosecutor's office, like that is something that at least on the books could result in jail time. To
Yeah.
the point that you raised earlier, it's like, is Snyder going to end up in jail? Like, probably not, but we're getting closer and closer to a series of events that at least being charged with something that could result in jail time, like at least is not really like a joke anymore.
Yeah, it's not contractual issues between the NFL and the Reds or the Commanders. It's actual law. It's it's the U.S. law. You can't
commit bank fraud.
Yeah, and so a couple of questions come up with that. One, I would like to know what the $55 million is for. If he's having the team pay $4.5 million to him just to have the Washington logo on his private jet, again, respect is not the word. I got to come up with another word, but just the audacity, the nerve. It's almost like if he can get away with this much stuff, it's almost like the more power to him. Like I don't know what to do.
Guy's a cockroach. Yeah,
it's just like at a certain point you have to respect it. And I really hope. Who knows how long this Snyder saga is going to go out? But now I'm picturing myself at the end just wearing full Commanders gear, like, don't sell the team, just like cheering them on. I hope that doesn't come. But
he's like a stone cold, like Steve Austin type heel. He's just like, he's like bad guy, but he's kind of keeping us entertained here. This is
bad guy.
I'll give you this conspiracy side. I had a thread that somewhat picked up steam. I've been looking at this case for 3 years, so this is some like little nooks and crannies I don't think everyone picks up on. There's this like kind of we talked about it a little bit. These minority shareholders are pissed at Snyder because of this alleged secret loan, and they think he's kind of embezzling money, and they think that he's running the company into the ground. Okay, they're pissed they're not getting paid, so they start this arbitration, and during the course of this arbitration, certain discovery comes out. So there's a text, Doug's, and I'll read you just the juicy part of it, but it's a text that we learned about in like late 2020, so almost 2.5 years ago. So this is from a lawyer, purportedly. I don't want to say, I don't want to get sued here, but allegedly from a lawyer for these minority, team owners. So he goes to Dan Snyder, a text: "If you continue your game, you know what I know and what I have never spoken about, and it has nothing to do about the media blank. It's the more serious blank. If you want to get to a clean conclusion, let me know. If you want a blank show, we are on for that too." So, Doug's, that was a text that came out, like, I think right around December, November of 2020. So you and I have spoke about all of them at this point, like the cheerleader shoot, the cooking the books, this one, that one. I'm like, I don't think that's what Moog is talking about. The more serious stuff, the things that no one's ever spoken about. And then we hear this particular story where the minority shareholders are alleging or getting close to thinking that bank fraud occurred. And that seems to check the boxes. So then I'm like sitting here and I'm like, hold on, is that the text? Did we get to where we needed to get to? Because this seems to be the more serious. Doug's, can we curse on this? This is Barstool.
Of course, this is Barstool. You can do whatever you want.
This seems like the more serious shit. This is not just cooking the books and having fun and moving ticket revenue left and right and pissing off other owners. This is a Bank of America, like one of the biggest institutions in our country, involved. This is Roger Goodell learning about this during an arbitration hearing years ago and saying, don't worry about it. You're not going to do anything about this. We're going to settle this case. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but now this is an allegation that the NFL covered up. And you said, like, what dirt does Snyder have on the other owners? It's like, we know about the Jerry Jones dirt. We've seen those allegations. We know the Jim Irsay stuff, the Bob Kraft stuff. Like, we know about a couple of these, but there was some like inkling that maybe Snyder had some dirt on not just like the owners, but Goodell. And, obviously Goodell is now kind of intimately involved in this. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, this checks all of the boxes as to something that would be something that the NFL would be trying to sweep under the rug. And I'll do you one further, Doug's. A reason, again, if Moog's, kind of threats are true and all this checks all the boxes. I mean, this is a reason why it would take you 3 years to, I'm going to put in air quotes, investigate the team, because you're doing a little bit of CYA if you're the NFL on the other side. You can't have certain things come out, right? Or else it makes the league look bad directly. So that's why I think you have all this visceral from the other owners that are like, Snyder is bringing us and dragging us into this. So
yeah,
again, I'm a betting guy. I would think that like I'll put it like minus 220, that this is the more serious shit. I don't know, I think unintentionally we might have cracked the case here, but this is some pretty, again, a very different chapter of the saga that we've heard to this point.
Yeah, and so going back to it, it's like it doesn't matter what the money's for, but it does bring up a question. So in order for it to be bank fraud, there would actually have to be fraud where, Dan Snyder or Dan Snyder representative maybe, forged some signatures or said, hey, I have the minority owner's approval, something to that effect. Would it still be bank fraud if Bank of America just said, or, just didn't do what they were supposed to do and didn't get the approval that was necessary?
That's fair. And I think that's why we have to separate kind of like the headlines from the meat. The federal prosecutors are investigating it, but the story that we just kind of explained, that would be a reason that would be a large reason to investigate it. Let's say it's just general incompetence on behalf of Bank of America, or alternatively, Bank of America is like, you know what, Dan Snyder is one of our best customers. We know now that Dan Snyder is using Bank of America to sell the team. So obviously they have some type of tight relationship, and they look the other way, and they just didn't do their proper due diligence in terms of closing the deal. Could there just be a private cause of action or private lawsuit between minority owners and Snyder? Sure. But the feds can look into it. Feds look into, and prosecutors in general, look into a lot of things that don't always result in charges. But, you have Snyder kind of thumbing his nose at Congress and the fans and this one, that one, the DMV area. It's not some random district, some prosecutor's office. It's the Virginia prosecutor's office that, you comb that DC area, the Maryland area, Virginia area. They want to look into this. And, we talked about in the last time we were together, but the DC Attorney General has, I think launched 2 separate consumer complaints against the team. So, Virginia doesn't want to feel left out here. They gotta represent the DMV area.
For sure, absolutely. And we've talked about it before, where it's like, oh, now we're really getting to the meat. It's like, well, that's what we thought maybe a year ago. And so my imagination's going crazy. I'm thinking, like, what are we going to learn about Dan Snyder and Roger Goodell a year from now when he still owns the team? And I don't know. Again, I will, by the time we talk, before the next time we talk, I will come up with a better word than respect. But that, as of right now, in my limited vocabulary, I'm somewhat putting that out there. Like you mentioned, calling him, he is the heel. He is the Stone Cold of the NFL right now. And
Stone Cold makes him seem way too cool. He's not Stone Cold.
He's not chugging beers. He's not saying.
Yeah, no, that was my bad. He's not.
He's not wearing jorts and leather vests. So he's
like Eric Bischoff. He's like kind of a pain in the ass, but kind of respect a little bit.
A little bit. Well, we'll see. The story will continue, I'm sure. I think that's about it for now, right? I think that kind of covers everything.
I mean, there's never a dull moment in sports. I can tell you about 100 other things, but with respect to the Snyder stuff and the NIL stuff, yeah, I think those are our probably A block and B block stories. Maybe another time you and I will talk PGA Live or the McAfee stuff, Brett Favre stuff. But this is a mouthful. We don't want to hammer everybody over the head with all this knowledge. No. We got to give it to them in small bites.
And I did see Pat McAfee tweet it out. It's real that Brett Favre did file something.
Served him. Yeah, they got the affidavit of service popped up. Yeah. So, listen, I know Pat's a Barstool alum. I gotta respect Pat over here. Pat's telling jokes and he's getting sued for defamation. That is nonsensical. There's, I put the odds out publicly. I think they've now gone up a little bit. I think it's like minus 1,200 for Pat. I feel very confident in his defense here.
A strong favorite.
It's like a 1v16. Favre is like St. Mary's. Those little dog. What was you might have to edit this. What was the 16 seed? What was it?
St. Peter?
No. The who was the 16 seed that beat Virginia?
They're
St. Peter's. They're St. Peter's. They're Doug Eddard. That's fine.
Yeah. There we go. Well, I appreciate it, Dan Luss. Thanks for coming back on. Dan, people can catch you on, and I always say this funny, but Conduct Detrimental.
Yes, that's the podcast. We're now like a couple times a week. Brandon Miller. We always got stuff to talk about on our show. But yeah, Doug's always a pleasure to join you. And listen, that pre-law degree, I think you're treating you well over here.
I think so. I appreciate that. That is a good note to Florida State. Hey, listen, if they want to put me in some kind of, booster collective for FSU, use my face, I'm more than happy for it. Thanks a lot, Dan, and we'll talk to you next time.
My pleasure.